it's very easy for people to lose control of their narrative, whether it's an individual leader or a business. The consequences down the line, instead of just being upfront now, they are always exponentially worse. I was in with our CFO or our CEO, and the way he was talking, I realized he's in this all is lost moment. Like, he doesn't realize we have the unique treasure in order to solve this problem.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we explore the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands like yours with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Now, today on The Growth Switch, I am joined by Damon D'Amore, a C-suite advisor, keynote speaker, and the founder of Legacy Mentor, where he helps leaders master storytelling, psychological performance, and crisis leadership at the highest levels of business. Damon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad we met through a mutual pal just, on LinkedIn. Usually you meet people on LinkedIn and you never speak to them, but this is wonderful.
Yeah, it's true. No, and it's a pleasure to have you. So you've got a ton of expertise. When I was trying to consider this podcast and storytelling, I was like, where do we even start our journey? So, you have been in so many different industries, from Wall Street, Hollywood, mentoring Fortune 500 executives. I would say that your career path isn't exactly traditional. So what is the through line that's connecting these very different worlds with what you do right now?
The through line, shockingly, has been two things. Two through lines. One is the ability to tell a good story that is both not just compelling, but truthful and backed by data. And initially I did it in business when I built businesses on Wall Street, and then moving into Hollywood, I did a lot of nonfiction and reality documentary work. So, telling stories and be able to engage stakeholders in a way that is memorable and they want to advocate for you. And the second thing, actually going all the way back to Wall Street, was really truthful, honest networking skills that I developed with really senior leaders over the time that I've worked in over the last 30 years. And we can share about what I did, but I love business. And when I left Wall Street and went to Hollywood, there was still this longing to be in business in some way. And where I fell into Hollywood actually put me right at the crux of the top of Hollywood and the top of business, dealing with these mostly CMOs, but also CEOs in Fortune 500s for years, and working on business initiatives to support what they're doing in Hollywood, and also getting to be creative. So it was perfect, and that kind of naturally led me into the business that I'm in now about a decade ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. And let's learn a little bit more about what it is that you do right now.
Sure. So for the past decade, I've been the founder of Legacy Mentor. We basically me with a small team that supports me, but I advise mostly Fortune 500 C-suite executives, mostly CMOs and CEOs, around three areas: psychological performance, making sure their head's straight and they're confident and they have, a capacity for emotional relief. Two is storytelling for stakeholders. So we do lots of long form, detailed stakeholder communication strategies internally for teams, boards, customers, et cetera, and externally for whether it's the analyst community, if they're a public company, or regulators, whatever it might be. And the third area is crisis leadership and crisis mitigation. So I built really intense crisis leadership programs in 2020 and 2021 for three Fortune 500 C-suite clients. And that now, while we're not in crisis, they have to continue to operate in a crisis mindset, but without the scarcity and without the emotional, lockup, because you can't operate in a crisis mindset for too long without getting drained. So those are the three areas: psychological performance, storytelling, and crisis leadership. And the fourth kind of unnamed pillar is a women who lead program, because more than half my clients are women in the C-suite at that level. So I've developed a separate curriculum for women at that level post 2020, how the needs for leadership skills and traits have changed in the new economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really valuable and very much needed right now, especially like businesses don't always focus on their story. They hopefully they're focusing on building the business and making sure they have enough money to pay the employees and get through. But then when a lot of times I've noticed when businesses go for that exit, everybody wants to know that you have sound financials, but they also want to know what your story is. Hey, why are you selling? What's the story of this business? When I take this on, how am I continuing the legacy? And that's a place where a lot of these people could really be greatly impacted and helped with your services. Yeah.
And also in today's, social media, the whole 24/7 collapsing of narrative, the tolerance for narrative from a story to a commercial to a blog post to a 140 character tweet to a meme, it's very easy for people to lose control of their narrative, whether it's an individual leader or a business. So I tell people it's very important that if you don't tell your story, somebody else is going to tell it, and you have no control over how they're going to tell that story. And sometimes people are lazy about it and they say, oh, that's for the creatives or my marketing department or my comms people. But you have to be able to have the capacity to share why you matter in this world and to who specifically. Otherwise, you're just another name.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Now, something that you've talked about a lot is pragmatic optimism
Mhm.
as a leadership mindset. Could you break that down, like what it means and specifically how it can help leaders thrive during uncertainty?
Sure. I started talking about pragmatic optimism towards the end of 2020 when the crisis was supposed to be 2 weeks and out was into second round lockdowns, and nobody had heard the word furlough before. Most people, jobs were frozen. Um, there was this emotional tiredness by the end of the year of trying to stay optimistic. And finally, nobody had answers to anything. And there was this kind of deflating happening among leaders, and it was seeping into the culture around them,
Mhm,
like
mhm.
looking at who's in charge, who's leading the ship. Well, that guy or gal doesn't seem too confident right now. They seem exhausted, like I am. So, pragmatic optimism is a way of looking the world that I believe is you can be optimistic and hopeful, but you have to look at everything through a lens of reality. What is your situation, and being honest most necessarily with yourself. So there's a handful of pillars in pragmatic optimism that I work with my clients to have this worldview that's a healthy worldview. Is they need to develop some form of resilience. And that means resilience in my mind isn't a tool that you break in a box of glass in a crisis and all of a sudden you can be resilient. It has to be a mindset and a lifestyle. So you're consistently doing uncomfortable things so that when you have to do uncomfortable things, you're not going to shy away and you kind of lean into them. Don't lie to yourself or the people around you, which is, Dostoevsky's famous quote above all, don't lie to yourself. But it's very hard for people in the midst, especially of crisis, not to start negotiating with themselves and rationalizing and making up stories about why things are happening and not getting to the root of the cause. Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's you, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, Knowing your dragon or knowing your resistance, as Stephen Pressfield calls it, a dragon, like what is the main resistance to you accomplishing what you need to accomplish, and peeling back the layers of all the distractions, whether it could be the media attacking you or your brand or investors or whatever it might be. And then with regard to storytelling, telling a better and more truthful story that is clear and consistent so that once you communicate your values, your initiatives, your goals out to the world, everybody knows what they are without you being there to correct them or stand over their shoulder. Your employees, your customers, everybody can say what you stand for, and it's very clear, consistent, and is truthful. So looking at the world as an optimist, but being realistic about it. Like trees don't grow to the sky. I mean, there's no magic hack or fairy dust you could sprinkle on your problems, or you can't get your time management under control by buying 100 different planners and hoping one of them is the Jack and the Beanstalk bean for planners. No, you need to you need to attack things from a very pragmatic perspective, and it's painful and it's difficult for a lot of people to look in the mirror and take ownership of, out of the 10 things going wrong, I'm responsible for 4 of them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a great point. And so recently I was reading a book on our human bias and what goes on with our psychology. And if you do lie to yourself, because you were saying, hey, be honest with yourself, right? If you do lie to yourself, and you are able to tell yourself a narrative, no matter how false it is, you will start to actually believe it, no matter if it's true or false. So if you do feed yourself that false narrative, you will legitimately believe that that is the truth eventually, like once you've repeated it to yourself enough. And so, yeah, I think it is really good to start with the truth, so that when you're repeating that to yourself and that becomes your reality in your life and your narrative, at least you have a better handle of what's actually going on, you know?
I have a great real world example of that, actually. A CEO interviewed for my book of a big fast food restaurant chain during COVID when everything was falling apart.
Yeah.
All these other fast food chains wouldn't tell their employees literally what was going on.
Hmm.
And this one guy got on, I won't say what brand because I don't have permission yet for the book,
Yeah.
but still go with the clearances. But he got on like a nationwide call with 13,000 people that work at all of his franchises as hourly people. And he said, there is zero clarity on when this is going to end. I can tell you what our finances are at this point, but this is what else is unpredictable. And his board like attacked him for it and said, "What are you doing? People are going to freak out." And he's like, "No, they will respect the fact that we're being honest with them." 2023, 2 years after lockdowns, they had the highest number of employees that still worked for them
Mm.
versus the McDonald's and Subways and all of his competitors because they felt like, okay, at least they're being honest with us. Like we're not being totally put in the dark. So honesty goes a long way. You have to follow up with action.
Yes.
Um, but you're Jordan Peterson always talks about you can tell lies to yourself or other people, but eventually you get found out. And the consequences down the line, instead of just being upfront now, they are always exponentially worse. So, you see this with famous celebrities get caught in some PR scandal. The ones that deny it
Yeah.
gets dragged out much more horrible. I
Yeah.
remember Mark McGuire was like, yeah, I took steroids and people forgot a week later, but Sammy Sosa denying it was like hammering in the news cycle for
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
So yes, please don't lie to yourself
Yeah. Or anybody else.
or anybody else.
Right. So, okay, I do want to hear about the new book. I heard that it's coming out potentially, and books always tend to push a little bit, but potentially it's coming out, let's just say soon.
Yes, hopefully first quarter 2026. It started off as an authority piece, basically to separate myself from other people that do what I do with my clientele, saying these are the things I focus on. I'm not a culture guy, I'm not a DEI guy, whatever, et cetera. These are my pillars that we discussed. And the data that backs up these case studies are the crisis programs I built on the fly in the middle of early 2020 that lasted through the whole crisis for these large corporate executives and teams and their boards. So the book is essentially my take on the new business environment, which I call the new zero. All these people were talking about new normal, new normal, new normal. And I really believe, having been in business for 30 years from Wall Street through Hollywood, et cetera, venture capital, I've been a founder, I've been a corporate guy. There was something unique about 2020 that was different than 9/11 or '08 in that everybody in every category and sector was affected by it, and not just personally, professionally rather. Personally, we were all at this low point with lockdowns and scarcity and health concerns. So once everybody hit this low point, it becomes an internal way of dealing with everything around you, including business, which is usually external for people.
Mhm.
So a 0 point, as I call them, on your timeline of your life or your business, is a point where something happens that is so catastrophic that there's a definite change in your worldview, not just how you act and execute. And you can look back and say, this is when my worldview changed, and I've had to change how I interact with the world. And for my thesis is that going forward, there is no new normal. Hence, or therefore, every potential small crisis could be the next big crisis. So you have to operate in a crisis mindset, but it's impossible to do that over and over without getting exhausted. So how do you operate in a crisis mindset as a leader in a healthy way with emotional clarity and relief, but being prepared for what you can control? So the book is basically the pillars of my system and the women's leadership program, and how the skill sets and the needs of leaders have changed in order to be successful through crisis since 2020 that were much different than the decades before.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a much needed spin on that,
And I launched a Substack in advance of the book coming out, and I've been dripping out pieces of the book to get feedback on, and it's hitting a lot of nerves from retired C-suite execs, Fortune 500 I worked with 20 years ago, were saying, wow, this is even speaking to how it was before and how it's different now,
Yeah.
to people who went through it 3 or 4 years ago saying, yeah, I lived in a constant state of fear with nobody to talk to because all their stakeholders would judge them. So
Yeah. Yeah. And for all the viewers and listeners of this podcast, look below because those are going to be in the show notes. You're going to find the Substack You're gonna find all the good links where you can access Damon. So, you've said that resilience is not just a triage tool to use in crisis, but more of a lifestyle, right? So what does building resilience look like day to day for the top leaders in these C-suite positions?
It's actually there's a duality between their personal and their professional resilience, and they lean into both. They want to be challenged, and they're looking at the gaps in their skill sets, emotional, psychological profiles, and how they can film them. So, not everybody has to wake up and jump into a freezing tub of ice like Joe Rogan, or like they do something like that. But there is something that is uncomfortable for people that they need to call out, whether it's reading, coming to a place where they have some sort of mental clarity. Like meditation's very hard for people. Sometimes it's taking a cold shower, working out, whatever it might be. Um, Carving time out to do that out of their busy schedule and making trade-offs, because they know that by doing it every day, being uncomfortable and not wanting to do it, when they get into that hard meeting later that day and they look around at their, you know, for lack of a better word, fellow combatants, most of them are like, nobody else did a bunch of uncomfortable shit today before they walked into this meeting. Like, I'm stronger mentally than all these people in the room, And then business wise, it's literally tackling, a lot of marketing people. Now it's changing over the last 5 years. Marketing is becoming now more of a business generation and profit generation mandatory department. But back in the day, it's this black hole of unknown ROI. We're going to spend 10 million bucks a Super Bowl commercial. Maybe we sell more diapers. Who knows? But the CMOs that have survived and thrived over the last 5 years have become a lot more comfortable with finance and been able to communicate to their CFOs why these programs are not just necessary, but justified. So I've had clients who have been creative their whole life through brand strategy and ad agencies or whatever it might be, that they're a husband or wife, they have kids, they work 60 hours that week at their corporate job, but they're taking weekends for the next 10 weeks to take a class at Stanford about how to read a shareholder report, like all these things. And I've had literal feedback of, I went to my CFO for the annual budget negotiations, and just the fact that I was able to speak a little bit of their language, that I took a few steps toward them understanding what they do compared to everybody else, got me everything I wanted. They're so happy somebody cares.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, in that example, most CFOs think that everybody else in the company looks at them as an ATM. They just walk up with their hands out for money. Um,
Yeah.
so filling professional gaps, taking the time, making trade-offs personally, professionally, to do that, and doing something in your personal life, whether it's a quarterly, annual goal. I mean, you can say things like running a marathon, but maybe it's, I don't know, maybe your educational track never took you through literature and the great classics. Committing to reading a book a quarter, taking 5 hours a week out, and having some knowledge about the things that you didn't have before. But basically, doing things that you would rather be doing something else when you think about it. I'd rather be hanging with my kids, walking my dog, playing pickleball,
Yeah.
than learning how to read an annual budget and a shareholder letter.
Yeah. And yet all of these elements are our story. As a fellow storyteller, I think that a lot of times people only want to focus on the good. They only want to focus on the positive. They maybe only want to focus on the story as it serves marketing, as it moves the needle to make the dollars. But part of the story is all of the little elements, like exactly what you're talking about, the work-life balance, the family, that's all part of the story. So the storytelling is very central to your work.
Yeah.
So when you are working with these people, what makes a powerful corporate story? How can these leaders use narrative to really rally the stakeholders when the stakes are so high?
So you just use the word, knowing their stakeholders and knowing what their needs and wants really are, because usually when you dig in with them with research and they start talking to these people, actually, they just assume what they want or need. Their wants and needs are different, right?
Yeah.
So I talk about things in terms of, I'm a big hero's journey fan, but and heroine's journey, virgin's promise, etc. I use a lot of masculine and feminine storytelling, archetypical devices. But I talk in terms of 1.0 and 2.0. Today, as you and your stakeholders, your customers, your investors are living, is in their 1.0 state. And they have an idea that, they have a wish list. If only the CEO would do this, or we could do this, or release this product, we would be up here winning. But that's actually only a 1.5 version of what they know, because they only know what they know. I talk to the leaders and figure out, what can you offer them that would elevate them past their wildest dreams of what they want and elevate them to a 2.0 state of themselves? And
Yeah.
then figuring out what are those methods of communication channels? How do they want to be spoken to? Where do they want to be spoken to? What data do you need to support it? Um, how are you different than other people that could fulfill those needs, if at all? So it's a very, very detailed process. I don't want to switch the camera, but I've got an 8-foot whiteboard and there's probably 70 or 80 data points on my basic corporate storytelling program that really, really dig in with investigative questions to everybody around them, all their stakeholders, and also themselves. There's a lot of these leaders, they make decisions or they act a certain way or they have a certain leadership profile because of stuff from their personal life, and people don't necessarily know that, or they might
Mhm.
not give you grace for certain things that drive them crazy. So, why are you the most important person to deliver the wants and needs of your stakeholders to them? And are there some things that you have unique about you and your resources, your knowledge, et cetera, that are the only thing that can solve the problem? And they're usually not thinking in those terms. They're thinking in terms of, oh, they want faster internet, they want this, they want a better tasting hydrogen water bottle. Like that, what are you talking about? It's like top level, basically skimming the surface.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Hopefully that answered the question.
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's like a level of fluency, we're like, well, I speak English and, my partner speaks English. And so we can speak the same language. But when it comes to storytelling and when it comes to like, with a romantic partner, like with my wife, there's the love language. But when
Mhm.
it's your professional partner, there's a language that they need to speak. There is a language of numbers. And so there's a fluency of knowing what the numbers mean and where they're leading and the story that's behind the numbers. That's an important thing to deeply understand
Yeah.
and not ignore, speaking another person's language. Uh, and I think that's kind of maybe what you're hinting at is that
And it's very fulfilling because I've had people who are, chief legal officers or chief counsels at companies who are not by nature creative in this sense. But I collapsed this whole frame into maybe 4 or 5 data points on a visual story map that they can see an arc in. And then they've been in meetings where they've had challenges to what they want. And I'll get feedback and be like, I was in with our CFO or our CEO, and the way he was talking, I realized he's in this all this lost moment. Like, he doesn't realize we have the unique treasure in order to solve this problem. So
yeah,
they're starting to see other people's needs and wants and problems and challenges in a narrative visual map. And it's so satisfying to me because it's like, you don't have time to write down some 20-page PowerPoint of like, it's like, think of it in these 5 story beats and where are they on their journey right now?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
have they ever had a mentor personally or somebody online that they don't even know, but who do they look to for advice? Is there anybody for that? Like, how do you become that person?
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's something primal inside
Yeah.
of people that deeply resonates with stories. So even more than speaking a person's language is getting them to feel something, getting them to relate, to resonate with the material. And I think that's kind of the basic goal. It's to just like get them to give a fuck.
Dude, and it's all in the details. That's the thing. Like, I had people when I was in LA for 21 years, I would speak all over the place at different types of events, some of them cultural. And I did this like backyard barbecue hippie thing that everybody like in Silver Lake was having these like mini TED Talks. So I got up and I talked about something specific. And I was in a restaurant, I was in Swingers like a year later. And some guy walked up to me and he's like, "You're the guy that did XYZ when you were on Wall Street." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Dude, I saw you on this tree stump in this backyard and I remember the details of your story." And I tell people like, just a little bit of detail. If you're networking in a rotary room or whatever, and you meet a bunch of people, especially in LA, oh, you're a producer, you do this, you do that. It's like, well, I met this guy and he worked on Wall Street, but I remember he worked at the top of the World Trade Center, and that connects with them with no longer there, right? And produce these shows specifically, work with these people, and now he does this with these kinds of people, and it's like you gave somebody 3 data points that they're going to remember to separate you from everybody else. And if there's an emotional component to that, it's even better when you start talking to them and get their background and figure out, what they're lacking. Not that
Absolutely.
you're trying to be Machiavellian and exploit these people's emotions and, like
No,
prey
of
on
course
them.
not. Of course it's not. Yeah, I was when I was a kid forgettable. I worked in TV and film for 10 years. I was in Los Feliz, so I definitely had friends near those places where you're talking about. So we'd go around, and it was really interesting to me. I had actually made the mistake of going to film school for 4 years and studying film, and then trying to work in the industry. And the most interesting thing was, to me, all of it, the work, everything like that, was a hero story. It was all a journey.
Yeah.
All of that was a journey outside of the film. It was a journey. It was very much like, you need those touch points, those remembrances. You need those intimate personal details, because when somebody goes to remember you, to hire you for something or another, nobody really cares what you do. As long as you're marginally competent or capable enough, which Hollywood has proven you can be as marginally competent and capable as you want and still get feature films made. Um, you know, as long as you've got the basics covered, it's just like, oh yes, this is who this person is.
Yeah. Then you need it for yourself because times get hard, especially in Hollywood. Imposter syndrome creeps in, doubt creeps in. You start comparing yourself to everybody else from your hometown that like went the traditional route, and now they have like the white picket fence and 4 kids in a house and a beach house, and you're like running around trying to get a movie made. Those data points support like you didn't just come up with a great story. Like, I have done XYZ, and this is why I am right for this.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's incredibly important to know your story and to know the data points that back it up, because you got to tell it to yourself. Sometimes you got to be sitting at the diner at 3 a.m. being like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, and this is
yeah.
it's gonna work out.
Yes, yeah. So how do people find you? How do they work with you?
Well, mainly 2 ways. LinkedIn. I'm highly active on LinkedIn. I'll put the link in there for you. And my new Substack, which is free to subscribe. I'm not charging anybody for it. There's other perks for premium, but and my website, legacymentor.co, there's a contact form, and there's a link to download an article excerpt from the book, which is actually the pragmatic optimism piece. A lot more detailed. So website, Substack, LinkedIn.
Cool. And again, all those links are actually going to be right below in the show notes. So if you're listening, if you're watching, you are one click away from massively changing your life. David, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Hopefully it changed you for the better.
Changed me for the better. My life is now better, and I am going to remember this conversation with you.